Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this midweek Hebrew word study as we continue in the book of Ruth. I pray that you are enjoying this. The next few verses that we'll be going through today actually are illustrating kind of a style of courtship, if you will, between Boaz and Ruth. And so it's kind of interesting. Um, as we look through it, you're going to notice that there is repetition here, that there is a lot of information that one would think, okay, let's just get on with it. Why are we reading this? What's the moral of the story here? And we have to remember to just stop and enjoy um, what we have going on here and let it set the stage, let it reveal to us, what is is occurring. And again, while this is a story of the love story between Boaz and Ruth, there are many different levels by which we can apply this in spiritual realm. God's word has many different levels. There's a surface level, which is what we'll start reading here, but then there's also the level in which we take it and internalize it and look at it in a spiritual realm and say, okay, well, what can I get from this that will help me in my walk with God? What will speak to me? Who is the character? Is Boaz a similitude of God? Is Ruth the similitude of myself? And is this a giving us some indication on God's love relationship with us and how he interacts with us? And so just think about all that as we go through these next few verses and try to unpack some of the meaning. We will see what some of the Jewish historians have to say about it, and you'll find various opinions, which is the joy of doing this. There isn't just one right or one wrong answer. There are numerous ways to gain insight here. So as we look at verse 5, Vayomer Boaz, len ro, he said to his servant who was in charge, obviously Boaz wasn't on site all the time, coming here, and he sees the reapers, and he notices Ruth, and he says, Lemi Hana'ara Hazot, who is this young woman? And so, of course, here's where the courtship and the love story kind of starts. But of course, the sages have a lot to say about that. So let's take a look at what's going on here. Why does he notice her? And so you'll see in yellow, I highlighted a few things, but um, they're asking, well, was it Boaz's practice to inquire about every young girl that he saw? Weren't there other young girls in the field? What caught his attention? And so they talk in one of these midrash here that talks about that she would glean 2 ears of grain, but she would not glean three in accordance with one of the laws of the Mishnah. And again, uh, these are the Jewish laws that are the oral tradition. It's what were set in place. And many of these things were brought up by Jesus when he spoke about these laws that existed. So here we see a little bit of that, where in Christianity we would be not exposed to that, but we see it here mentioned. And so it's very interesting. Here's another midrash, which is just a Hebrew word for or Aramaic word for the interpretation. And it says, when he noticed her modesty, he inquired about her, that she, when gleaning, would stand and not bend over. She would keep her skirt fastened in such a way that it kept her from being immodest. Where they get that from, I don't know. That's just what one rabbi felt was the reason on why Ruth was noticed. Other one here, this other one said that Ruth was the only woman gleaning in the field at the time. Well, we're going to see in a few verses that that is not the case. So here, again, very interesting that this would find its way into the Jewish script, that this comment was made that she was the only person gleaning in the field, where in a few verses we're going to see there were all kinds of girls, other servant girls, gleaning in the field. So what caused Ruth to be noticed. And so here some commentators feel that Boaz was interested in finding out if she was married or single. He wanted to make sure he didn't act towards her in a unseeming way or harboring unseeming thoughts. Again, very, very interesting to hear what these commentators their take on it, but found it all into this book of Ruth. And so here's another one who says, oh, this is divine providence coming in because this was an unusual visit. Boaz normally never came around to the fields, but he came on this particular day because Ruth was there. It was divine providence. And so he greeted his men. He started asking about her. And of course, in this commentator's eyes, this was all an act of divine providence. Again, very interesting. Of course, we do know the end of the story. We do know that Ruth became part of the um, Davidic lineage. David came from her, and so Jesus came from her. So divine providence is very much in the picture. It's just interesting to hear the Jewish commentators take that into account. Some take more of a literal approach, some take more of a spiritual approach. So all of that was on just verse 5. So we get to verse 6, and of course the guy in charge answers and said, oh, she just showed up. She's a young woman. Again, bringing up her heritage or her ancestry of being a Moabitess. Again, this is somewhat of a derogatory, negative effect, um, speaking about where she came from. Oh, she's just one of those Moabite women who came back from the country with Naomi from Moab. So, verse 6, let's see what the sages have to say about that tiny little verse. And so here they comment that the worker supervisor responds, um, and a Moabite girl is he. And so you'll see that some of the commentators try to spin a very positive light upon her. Some will take a negative stance. This one here is spinning a positive light, saying even though she's a Moabite, her conduct is praiseworthy and modest. And she was instructed by her mother-in-law Naomi, and she learned well. Her conduct of modest behavior was drilled into her by her mother-in-law. But then another one chimes in and says, well, the supervisor tried to dissuade Boaz from showing interest in the girl. And again, they make some assumptions here that this girl was very young and Boaz was very old. They feel he was like 80 years old at the time and that Ruth was about 40 years old, even though we're going to find that she does bear a child afterwards. So again, um, where do they get these ages from? We really don't know. Also bringing up that she was a Moabite, and as of yet, this law of the Moabite was not yet dealt with, and so she was still forbidden. And we're going to see that this also takes over. Then the other supervisor comes in and says, oh, her conversion had not been sincere out of love for God, but out of a desire to find shelter. Or maybe it was out of a love for Naomi. And then the other supervisor says, you know, whoa, aren't there any other nice, good Jewish girls for you to marry? Because you are an important guy. Boaz, why are you being interested in this foreigner, this Moabite? Why aren't you being interested in a nice Jewish girl to take home and show mom? You know, so again, it's very, very interesting how they comment. And these opposing comments are all there just to stimulate thought. So we get through verse 6. Again, this, for those of you that just joined in, this is kind of the courtship beginning, and it shows just as in any normal courtship, there are those who are in favor and there are those who are opposed of the two parties um, coming together, and so we see this courtship developing. So verse 7, um, it said that the supervisor said that Ruth came to her and said, can I please gather among the sheaves and the reapers? And I had heard the story about her, you know, that she had come with Naomi. And so I said, sure. But there's another little portion on here that's very interesting. It says that she had continued Haboker from the morning, Ve'ad ata, until now, ze shivta haviti meat, and she's only rested a little bit in the house. So why was it necessary to include this little tidbit of information? We might pass over it, but you know, do we have to know everything about what she did? Why was it important that she was working all day and from morning until now, and she's only rested a little while? Well, let's see what the commentators have to say about that. So we get to verse 6, and here the commentator says, well, I let her come in. This is purportedly what the supervisor said because she was converted. She had converted to Judaism, and as a Jew, she's entitled of gleaning. Another one says that, okay, she's a Moabite girl, but she's young and capable of childbearing. And under the ban of the Moabite, she wasn't included. So again, here comes this discussion. Is this forbidden partnership here, or is it going to somehow be dealt with according to the laws that exist? And so they say positive things about her. And so she said, I will glean. And she asked permission. So here it says, look at Ruth displayed good manners and modesty. How they get modesty, I don't know, but they got good manners and modesty by asking uh, positions, uh, by asking permission to do that. And then it said that she had been standing and working a very long period of time. So it shows diligence. And then finally, the last part of this verse, it talks about that except for the time when she sat in the hut. Well, why was she able to go in the hut? And so they just dissect this and saying that Naomi had instructed her well, that Ruth followed everything she was supposed to do, that she was modest, that she was hardworking. Even though it was hot outside, she only rested a little while in the house. So we see this relationship starting to build. You learn a little bit about Ruth. Boaz gets to find out more about her. And so finally we get to verse 8 here, and Ruth or Boaz says to Ruth, and calls her a daughter, calls her Bati, my daughter. So again, this is implying that there was an age difference here. He didn't call her a woman. He didn't call her um, anything that was interacting as far as he had an interest in her. He called her his daughter. Again, a very interesting choice of words here. And he starts showing her favor, and he says to her, don't go and glean in any other field. Don't leave this place, but stay close by. And here we see that there are other servant girls. He says, stay close to the servant girls. So to come counter that other uh, interpreter in the previous verse that there were no other girls there, here we see clearly that there were other girls. And how did uh, Ruth stand out from these other girls? Weren't they all dressed the same? Didn't they all, do their hair the same? Why would one even be noticed? They were Middle Eastern. They would all be of darker complexion, darker skinned. How did she even stand out? This is not something that's talked about, but obviously it's something that Boaz would have seen these other servant girls and seen Ruth and noticed the difference. Maybe we can only surmise. And so he's giving her favor. And verse 9 says, let your eyes be on the field and stay with them. I've commanded the young men who were also going and reaping. This must have been quite an operation of people working very, very hard, servant girls, young men. And I've instructed the young men to stay away from you and not touch you. And if you are thirsty, I don't want you to run off and get water somewhere else. Go right to the vessels and drink from where my workers are working from and where the young men are coming from. So let's see what the sages have to say about that. So he says, calls her my daughter. It was natural for an elderly man to address a woman that was much younger, and it would suggest he's treating her in a paternal fashion. Yeah, okay. Well, we know he marries her, so this is really um, could be kind of creepy, kind of strange. What changes here? Again, maybe the age difference wasn't so great. These are all just the sages commenting. And again, here the sages say that as soon as Boaz met Ruth, he was told of her modest behavior and was greatly impressed. And but he wanted to put her to the test. What kind of test is this? He wanted to find out if her conversion had been insincere and whether she was just a gold digger here or trying to get something. So he starts testing her. So maybe this is part of it. Do not glean in the field of anyone else. So this was a test. Would she stay with him? And so the Midrash here, which is the interpretation of these other rabbis, start talking about that this actually had a significance of meaning you shall have no other gods before me, speaking of the one true God of Israel. How they get that out of this, I do not know. So they equate gleaning in another field to mean having no other gods before me, staying in the field of Boaz, staying true to the one true God of Israel. And so he says, stay here close to my female workers and keep your eyes on my field. That's another interesting comment. Not to be enticed by other fields that may look to have a better harvest, to have more grain on them, but to keep your eyes on his field and his field only. And through this, according to the sages, Boaz recognized Ruth as a righteous woman. And so they go into all of this about having um, a righteousness, a righteous or a generous eye shall bring blessing, quotes from Proverbs. And it was just very, very cool to think that they're reading all of this stuff into it, building Ruth up as to being worthy of being married to him afterwards. And so he says again, to the men, you are not to touch, not to interfere, and then brings even a scripture from Deuteronomy into this on how Boaz is showing love to the stranger and love to those that are different. And again, that's just beautiful. Beautiful commentary. Talks about a little bit about going to the jugs if you get thirsty, don't hesitate to drink from the jugs of water that were fetched by the young men. And I want you to stay with me in my field, associate with my people, and I have set this all up to protect you. And so again, you see this love story, this saga. It's kind of like a Hallmark movie taking place of all the little things that are interacting and how we see, as I believe is the divine hand of providence, bringing this all together, showing the great love story that's going to develop. So again, there's so much here. It's just beautiful. And next week, when we get to verse 10, we'll see how did Ruth respond, when she's shown this favor, when, again, we're going to see this word for grace come into play here, and how Ruth responds. And again, how you want to think of it, how you want to look at it. Do you feel a spiritual awakening, a spiritual understanding? Is this a metaphor maybe of how God interacts with us, showing us great favor when we don't deserve it and we're not worthy of having his favor among his people, receiving the bountifulness of his grace from his fields of harvest? You can see all of that coming into play here. So it's a beautiful, beautiful story. I hope you're enjoying it. And we're going to end with verse 9 today. So God bless you, and hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.